Oh my. Um, Clive,
Yes.
how's it going?
I'm well, Kenneth.
Good, good, good.
Yes.
This is Literary as Feck, where Clive and I talk about books and literary things. It is my
Read
choice this
books.
time. Yeah, basically books.
Basically books,
Pretty
yeah.
much, pretty much books.
We haven't
Um,
done this for a little while, right? So we're slightly rusty, I feel.
yeah. And so this has been kind of on the docket for a long time. I don't know
Hmm.
when it was that I even brought this up, and then it took us a while to get a copy of it. And then when we did, I had no idea that this was the
Yeah.
doorstopper that it is. And so I think in a few ways we'll talk about this. I didn't understand really what I was getting into with this. I think I had a very different picture of what this book was going to be.
Okay.
What it is. I'm not I'll get ahead of it and say I'm not disappointed by what the book turns out to be at
Hmm.
all, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. Um,
Okay. What did you think it was going to be?
Funny,
Ah,
funny,
okay.
funny, and maybe arch and maybe mean. About like I got this idea that it was kind of this like it was this infamously scabrous kind of diary where he'd kind of trashed all of the people that he worked with and stuff.
Right.
Um, in a kind of a witty and sort of I don't know um, and I don't. That's not really what this is.
No, I mean, there's a little bit of that, but so you were thinking something a bit more like witty put downs in the
Yes,
kind of Oscar Wilde, Noel
Noel
Coward
Coward
kind of
meets John Waters maybe in some
right,
way,
right.
and yeah, and it's not that at all. And I certainly I didn't realize before reading this I didn't know he had committed suicide.
No, I don't think I knew that. Well, the thing is though, it is kind of it's up in the air a bit, isn't it?
Right. I mean, the
I mean,
coroner. Well, it is until you read this book, and then it's hard to imagine that this, in some ways, isn't a kind of. And this is, of course, we should say this is not his entire diary, right? This is, a highly edited version of it, just in terms of brevity, right? That's just like if you look
yes,
at each week, you get maybe two entries per week across,
yeah. I
many,
th
many.
I think I don't think I'm imagining this. I think you can kind of get the total unexpurgated
Okay.
things as Kindles, maybe. Or is it maybe there's also like the complete Kenneth Williams letters, I think, as well as another
Right.
thing.
And he did also write like a couple of books of sort of autobiography as well,
Yes, he
right? Which
did. Yes,
come up in
just
here, which
just William, right? And yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm like you. I actually found this very rewarding as well. And you'll have to steer the boat on this one because I read this one just before Christmas last year. Actually,
right.
it was my big bath read that I would look forward to every time that I took a long bath. So I also drank quite a lot of alcohol. That's
Right.
quite big.
So recollections may be hazy.
Yeah, but I think I've probably spent as much time as I want to spend, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna. That's
Yeah.
not ding on the book, but I'm not sure if I'm
Hmm.
going to go out and read like even more. Uh,
I would need a few years, I think, myself as well. You definitely, if you read it in kind of a short-ish space of time, you definitely
which you
feel like
didn't.
which I didn't, but then it felt like because like I kind of I would binge it and then I would put it down for a while and I would come back and binge it again. But definitely you do feel like you've lived in Kenneth's head, which is not necessarily the best place to be living, as it turns out. And so this is what's I guess this is what surprised me was the kind of the intense sadness of the book
Yeah.
and of his existence, right? And so maybe before we talk about the book, actually, just for a second, do you remember, like, do you have any strong memories of Kenneth Williams from childhood?
Um. Well, he was the prominent carry on because even though he would hate to hear that, that is
Mhm.
what he's pretty much remembered for,
Yeah,
right? I think he's the one everyone would do impressions of. Like he's the one, well, like you opened the show, right? He's the one,
right.
oh, like he's the one who was most kind of yeah, this is the most kind of loud trumpet up front kind of.
Right.
But I don't think if I was, do you think? I think I would. I probably found him in general funnier than, and we'll get to that a little bit later at the tail end, but in general funnier than the films, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
Like I liked him, and I liked his nemesis, as it turns out, Charles Hawtrey as well.
Yes.
Who's
Yeah.
kind of like on the he's like on the opposites. Like they kind of they balance each other out
Yep.
kind of interestingly.
Mhm.
They're both extremely camp, but in very different
Yes.
ways.
Yeah. I wondered actually, and if you think this as well, was Charles Hawtrey the model for like Walter the Softy and a number of other of these kind of like simpering, which like when you actually think about British comics, it's funny, we're going to be talking about Oink soon, and it kind of to me connects to this. There is this thing that I'd forgotten about, this like thread of like homophobia in English comics of that era, where you have like the thug is the hero of the comic, and the school SWAT slash, again, Handsy, yeah, this very kind of, this limp-wristed kind of stereotypical character simpering around and tossing daisies and stuff.
Yeah,
the butt of a lot of kind of like.
I think with Charles Hawtrey, there's something about Charles Hawtrey. There's always a dignity to him somehow,
right.
that the other those other imitators kind of like weren't afforded somehow. Like there's something about Charles Hawtrey,
a naiveness.
Yeah,
about
there's
like an innocence, which is like totally at odds apparently with.
Like he always kind of comes off seeming, the other people seem more foolish than him.
Right.
But anyway, Kenneth would be spinning in his grave to think we're talking about Charles Hawtrey
Yes.
So, but having said that, if there's a Charles Hawtrey Diaries, I would definitely read that.
No questions. I think they would be sketchy as hell. Because oh my god, I read something about him when I was doing the research for this, where like some point in the 80s, like his house or like his apartment burned down, something like that, and he was like, he and a 15-year-old rent boy had to be like pulled out by the firemen or whatever, and he was completely blasé about the whole thing. Like, and I can only imagine he must have been in his 60s at that point. Interesting fellow.
Yeah, there's a chapter on him in that head press book, Fallen Stars, about, which also has a chapter on another deeply sad kind of comedian of slightly different, but Benny Hill as well as the other one. You find out that Benny Hill was just chucking all this money he had in just like some chest of drawers, and just never, he just hoarded all this cash that he never got to spend. And another deeply sad, the crying clown.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, that, I said that comes through loud and clear, I think, in the book. But then it's also the sense with him, and from watching the documentary as well, is how much of this mix of self-love and self-loathing, like at such a heightened level, that, it's almost
that documentary was good. The 2-part documentary.
Yes.
What was it called? I can't remember what it was called now. It's up on YouTube. It's part of a series. Is it the Bookmark series? Maybe.
Is it the Reputation?
Reputation. Sorry. Yes. Reputation is quite right. Yeah. Search for that on YouTube. Listen, and beware, because it was a 2-parter, and people have put up the first part, but the second part isn't. But there must have been a later broadcast version where they combined the two, and that's online. You look for the 1.5-hour version, right, rather than just the hour one, because it's a condensed version of both. I've never found the second part. But it's really good. It's a really nice follow-up.
It's an excellent companion. Yeah, I think if you did decide to read all 800 pages of this, it's certainly well worth doing after. But so for me, I remember really liking Kenneth Williams as a kid. You know, he would have been on my radar, obviously in the Carry On films, and to me, you know, a Carry On film wasn't really a Carry On film unless he was in it.
Yes, there's very few he's not in, right?
Yeah.
He's not in Carry On Up the Jungle, I know, because we were planning to watch that.
Right.
For other reasons. And then we decided to drop it because, Kenneth Williams isn't actually in this one. So.
Yeah, but you're right. I think that he only missed 5 or something like that out of the entire run. And he notes in the diary each time he passes on one, and kind of.
Oh yeah, he's very ambivalent. Like he knows where his bread is buttered, but on the other hand, yeah, he's quite savage, right? What is this shit that I've got in the mail? And like,
right,
yeah.
Yes, yeah. And he does. I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's so strange. Like he has this intense love-hate relationship with the entire business, right? Like he desperately needs the attention, and you know, as his career kind of founders a little bit later on, right? And he's not necessarily doing, you know, the work on screen and stage anymore. He just becomes this talking head, right? On talk shows, and he goes on talk shows and kind of he said at one point he talks about like excavating his life or something like that, you know, like basically,
right,
and then putting it on display in this public forum, and it's all, and yet you feel like without the spotlight, he barely exists.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about him as well, I always thought growing up, and we should mention as well that there's a lot of Polari slang in this book as well, which is, for those who don't know, Polari was kind of like basically underground kind of homosexual code words for things and stuff, when you know, back not that long ago, it was, you know, still illegal to actually be gay in the UK, right?
Yes.
And yeah, the thing I found quite interesting about him as well growing up is, as a child, without voicing it, like he was clearly supposed to be coded as a gay man, right? But you weren't laughing at him because he was gay in the way that, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of that in films growing up as well. But it wasn't you laughing at him when he was, because he wasn't in any way, shape, or form trying to hide it. He's very upfront, but on the at the same time, never explicitly kind of. So it's a weird one. It's like he's about as out as you can possibly be,
without saying,
while also being very deeply closeted. It's a bizarre,
so deeply closeted that within himself, and we'll talk about this a bit. But yeah, but he was never really able to. He was never comfortable at all with his sexuality, right?
No, I mean, deeply wanting to engage, but yeah, so often just you know, just resorting to a Barclays.
Yes. Yes. And his apparently a rich fantasy life, with a lot of kind of it sounds like a lot of sort of S&M, but more on the masochistic side of things in terms of
he sounds like he could, I mean, I could relate to, he sounds like he could have a good time by himself, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sometimes he just, you know, like, it's like fabulous session tonight, you know.
And he's just like hoovering in his underwear.
In his underpants,
yeah, which, you know, I appreciate that. I think that's something that maybe not enough people cultivate in their life, like just how to enjoy yourself, right?
And well dramatized by Michael Sheen in the
yes. So yeah, Phantopalooza, we'll mention in passing, Phantopalooza from 2005, I think. So this is, very, very clearly drawn directly from these diaries. Right? Very good, actually. Yes. I was quite surprised how Michael Sheen is fantastic.
He's brilliant, and the guy who plays Charles Hawtrey also is uncannily, because I just seen Charles Hawtrey because I just watched Carry On Sergeant, and I was like, fuck me, that guy does an amazing.
Yeah. Also, I forget his name. I've seen him in lots of things, but the guy who plays Hancock as well, is really
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
The voice and everything is
yeah, spot on.
although the only thing about the because I thought that drama was really good, but the only thing I would say, there were a few, I don't know if Hancock came out of it a bit I don't, my memories of the book
Mhm.
Kenneth Williams had his problems with
Yeah.
Hancock, but Tony Hancock, but I get the feeling overall he was quite respectful of the opportunities he gave.
Right.
Whereas in that TV movie, he just seemed to be pretty much just a bit of a dick. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
so that was a bit of shorthand that I think suffered. But overall, and yeah, Michael Sheen is just, he does that thing where, I suppose if you were to do a side-by-side comparison, you might notice the difference. But he does that thing of just totally making the role his, doesn't he? And
Oh, he disappears. I mean, from the very
really
first
think you're
scene of him
watching.
on like ramrod straight on the bicycle, you
Yeah,
know, and then if you've seen the documentary footage, it
yeah.
looks just the same.
But he somehow manages to avoid. It's this close to stepping over into caricature.
Yeah.
But the thing is, with Kenneth Williams, he was such a self caricature
Yeah.
anyway
Yes.
that you
Yes.
can't really get around it, right? Like,
But he channels the sadness so really respectfully.
yes,
I mean, it's a powerfully sad film actually as well.
it is. It is.
It's really good. But I was gonna say, like, just getting back quickly to the whole thing of you know, my memories of Kenneth Williams as a kid were kind of what you just said. Was that I knew something was up. I don't know if I even had a name for it when I was 5 years old or 6 years old, but I remember thinking like, that's an interesting adult. Like that's an adult. That's like something's going on there. That's and it was like, you know, watching him do Jack and Ori as a kid. Like I recently revisited an episode called The Dribblesome Teapots, and it's fucking fantastic. I mean, it's just Kenneth Williams at his most camp and outrageous and arch, and he's doing children's TV, which is something I think is interesting, that, you know, at a time when it was illegal, as you said, right, to be engaged in any kind of gay sex, that obviously, you know, queer entertainers were like, no one batted an eye that they were in doing children's TV. You know, Will o' the Wisp. I mean, that was later on. That was, you know, would have been, things would have been a bit more permissive. But I remember enjoying Will o' the Wisp. I don't know if it would hold up, but as a kid,
For some reason, Will o' the Wisp used to terrify me.
Okay.
The opening kind of credits with the thing shining onto the woods. For some reason, that creeped me out.
Okay.
I still watched it, but I was something frightening about Will o' the Wisp for me. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. He was one of those. He was one.
It was the same thing that Rick Mail had.
That's what I was going to say.
Too. It was that kind of the naughty adult, the adult who's somehow not quite an adult.
Yeah, it didn't have to grow up, like, because you'd watch and you think, oh, that's cool. I don't have to grow up after all. I can do what this person does.
I don't have to be a boring bastard, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
There's maybe an opportunity. So yeah. So I mean, I think that's why in a way it is a bit of a bring down to read the book and realize just the depth of his struggles, right?
Just to push that a little further, it's not just that I don't have to grow up thing. It's because at the same time, both of them, Rick Mail as well, kind of both of them kind of hinted at something very, very naughty that you're not allowed to do as a child. So there's that as well, right? There's like, I'm allowed to do that naughty grown-up stuff you can't do, but I'm still allowed to not do the boring grown-up responsibility thing that goes along with it, right? Like the best of both worlds, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I guess, you know, the beginning of the book, obviously, you know, we sort of see we don't see much of his childhood. Obviously, the diary starts when he's a teenager and then kind of stops and comes back after he has some time.
The military, right?
Yeah, the military, where he becomes an entertainer. Which apparently
he must be in Hong Kong, like 5 or 6 years. For my father was in Hong Kong, very much that time period. So that was interesting for me as well, to kind of, because I'd heard certain stories and like that period of time that part of the world was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember my dad kind of talking a little bit about this kind of thing.
And just so he gets involved in entertainment there, right? Which is
Yes.
fascinating to me. That, like, I mean, that there's this whole kind of world of military camp, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating. The guy, a very don't ask, don't tell, I guess, from the but so clear and obvious. It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating the way that these things just kind of existed side by side. I mean, I suppose the entertainment industry has always been, a safer space,
Yes.
potentially,
Yes.
going back to Shakespeare and
But
right.
the interesting thing about, as you mentioned, that going back to the child, the other thing that's a kind of an interesting part of Kenneth Williams, which you don't necessarily think of because he's created his own kind of weird brand out of whole cloth almost.
Mm-hmm.
But you forget an element about him as well. It was he was a through and through Londoner as
Oh
well.
yeah, Cockney.
He's a proper fucking, which is weird because that's the other thing I used to like about actually his outbursts sometimes in the Carry On film. He goes from this kind of
Yeah,
weird, oh, kind of theatrical thing, and all of a sudden, yeah, what you doing there? Kind of
yeah.
like what? It's like
Oh yeah, yeah.
tonal shift.
Yeah,
Really
yes.
strange.
No, you're right. I mean, he could go. Yeah, he could go in a sentence from this
Yeah,
arch kind of Noel Coward thing to this real
it's like
gutter
a
snake.
Barrow Boy or something. Like,
Yeah. And in
which
that
is
way, I feel like
such an interesting like combination.
he played. I think he just said he played with all the codes. Like he was bending more than just gender, right? But
Yeah.
class and I mean, because I mean, in the documentaries, it becomes clear that he kind of just goes away from home and stays with some. I don't know if it's a relative or someone extent, whatever it is anyway. But
Well, he's
who wears
sent away during the war as well, isn't he?
right.
When they're evacuated out to the countryside.
And he's also at some point he's sent away to do training. He doesn't want to be his father's a hairdresser. His father's apparently a tremendously homophobic hairdresser,
Yes.
which is a fascinating thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I suppose anyway, yes. So then yeah, he goes away and then he kind of comes back and he comes back with the accent. It's like he's taken it on.
Right. Right.
And then his dad is even more like nonplussed and disgusted by is the effeminacy, but also this kind of affected upper class
Well,
thing.
it's funny as well. I've seen this with my own eyes. I remember once. So when I went to sixth form college, there was I don't think I was in any classes with him, but there was a young man same age as me, like 16 years old or something, and he did drama, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he was really, 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 really camp, like
Right.
super
Mm-hmm.
camp. And I didn't think anything about him because I would see him almost every day in the context of the drama department
Mm-hmm.
at this sixth form college, which was miles away from the village where we grew up. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember once, I can't remember for whatever, we'd gone on some kind of trip together somewhere and had ended up stranded somewhere. And he called his father to come
Mm-hmm.
and pick him up. And I was like, oh, do you want a lift or whatever? Oh, okay, whatever. And then I was amazed, like his dad turns up and his dad's like a total 100% Welsh farmer,
Yeah.
donkey jacket,
Mm-hmm.
Wellington boots, cloth cap.
Right.
And I'm a bit, I'm talking to him, and I think he's because and he's I suppose in his terminology, he's surprised that he has like a normal
Right.
friend, and I'm like talking Welsh to him and stuff or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of meanwhile in the back, his own son is kind of very much kind of fuming campfully, and I was thinking, how does this home life like this
Yeah.
amazed me, like, and this kid had clearly overnight gone off, he'd just been in the village and the local school and gone off and just reinvented himself overnight, and his father must be so confused, or like yeah.
Where were we? You were in Wales. with a friend. Yeah, so I think you're right, and I think that that's again that kind of place where acting and possibly being in the part of the LGBTQ plus kind of community, right, seems to have this overlap where if you're an actor, you're obviously going to be better at taking on and kind of adapting yourself to your surroundings, right? That ability to kind of not only read the room, but also read the accent, to be able to mimic things and kind of, which makes, and then to my mind, growing up as well, that very, very upper class British thing always read as slightly effeminate.
It's camp, I suppose, is what it is. Yeah.
Right.
But which is, to be honest, is another thing that fascinates me. I've always been fascinated by that weird intersection of like being a gay man and camp. Because again, going back to that same sixth form college experience, I remember again in the drama, I had a friend, a gay friend who was in the drama. There was like two main guys who were like they were like the two most promising, and one was my friend who was an openly gay young man, but who was very very non-effeminate or camp. Like he was a little bit, if you spent 30 minutes or something in his company, there would have been a few tells, but in general he was just like kind of acted very much like a regular bloke who just happened to be gay.
Yeah.
And then there was another guy who was the complete, like he was the total like flamboyant. Everything was a huge drama, and it was just an interesting thing because you were wondering like, well, how much of that is like, because after a few like this was in the 90s, so when he would have grown up, this would have already been an established like, oh, this is how theatrical gay men act or something like that. And I've always been fascinated because it doesn't make any sense to me that like biologically being homosexual means that you automatically like show tunes, right? So yes. I'm always been kind of quite interested in the how much of a like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing it is, where you see other depictions of homosexuality and you're like, oh, that's how I'm supposed to behave, versus how much of it is. I've always been kind of fascinated by that.
The culture piece versus I mean, it's I can say, having worked with kids over the years, and having friends as well. I mean, friends who hadn't come to terms or didn't realize that they were gay when they were maybe 12.
We're gonna out them here.
Yes, yeah, I have a list. So, and yet without having a name for it, they were still, you still knew, there was really no question, and you were kind of waiting for them to figure it out, in a way, and when they might be, dating girls when they're like 14 or 15, you're like, okay, all right. And yes,
and then the girlfriends, oh, so we're watching Beaches again, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I don't know. I suspect it is. I suspect it is both. I suspect there is a culture, and once you figure out, okay, oh, that's why maybe I am the way I am, or why I'm attracted the way I'm attracted, then maybe you make the choice. Well, do I want to? Do I want to be part of this kind of bigger culture and take on some of its?
Yeah, I think it's to do with like, so if you grow up straight, right, I think there's obviously for a lot of there's that kind of weird coming of age period where you're like, oh, how do I act manly? And people sometimes take the wrong kind of approach and act a bit twatty or whatever. And I suppose, well, yeah, of course, I guess why wouldn't that also be a dilemma for? Yeah, I think sometimes we afford. I think because in the past, luckily it's kind of changing a little bit now, but because in the past it's it's been something that people have had to keep under wraps for a while. I think maybe we assign a certain amount of like there's an over expectation that like, oh yeah, well they've I don't know what the correct terminology, because they've been forced to kind of that like they're better at dealing with identity or something in a way, like
Okay.
but that's not necessarily the case, right? You can still be a massively confused gay man and you're not quite sure how to be a man in the same way that
Right.
a heterosexual would think, right?
I will say, I don't know if you watched Sex Education at all, but I did watch the first couple of seasons of it. It's that British TV series about like set in a kind of a secondary school and about a kid who becomes a sex counselor at the school.
Oh, I don't know.
But you know, his best friend is played by an actor called Ncuti Gatwa, who's the new Doctor Who actually now.
All right, okay, I didn't know that.
And he is yeah, I mean the character he plays is quite flamboyant. But what I really liked about the show was it really demystified a lot of maybe what being a gay teenager was. I have a feeling it was written by somebody who obviously is pretty intimate and pretty comfortable with it. But what it did, like it didn't seem made up. It all rang very authentic to me, right, without necessarily knowing that it would be authentic. But I remember thinking there was something so simply beautiful, and it was so simply like, oh yeah, I can completely relate to these moments in my own teenage life, but I guess I just experienced them in that very heteronormative kind of a way,
right?
You know, but the
I think
moments,
that's the thing, is that we forget that there's so much overlap, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that Venn diagram is, there's more overlap.
And to bring it around to Kenneth Williams, this is another kind of a good example in a way of him kind of being, I suppose, a victim of his own like you were saying, when kind of you know, facing this kind of monolithic kind of personality that is Kenneth Williams, it would be very easy to, because he's othering himself in a way.
Oh, absolutely.
So like you're like, oh well, clearly he's off in his own, and yeah, maybe he doesn't have the problems that I have, or because he just seems like such an alien thing, and you're thinking, oh, good for him, he's off to, but that, like, it disguises all this kind of, I mean, more than usual pain and self-loathing, I think. And
yeah, I mean, I have to say, well, when reading the book and as it went on, I mean, certain things started to kind of jump out, and I'm not a doctor and I have no right to diagnose anybody. But I'm going to, yeah. No, I mean, the obvious ones are you know, some form, I'm guessing, of OCD, of obsessive compulsive disorder, around the kind of the germophobia and the kind, and the way, I mean, like there's a scene which is funny that you don't get it from reading the book, but then when you see it, I thought initially when I was watching that BBC play, the Fantabulosa one, I was like, oh fuck, they really haven't spent much money on, like, because like he walks into his apartment and it's so gray and drab, there's nothing on the walls. He goes over to his cooker, right, and he rolls the cling film off the top of the element and puts the kettle down, and all of that is apparently real, right? That's,
I have to admit, side to side, reading that in the book and seeing it in the film, the thing that struck me about that more than anything is that seems incredibly dangerous to have cling film. Isn't that a very flammable indeed? And he just slightly
rolls it to the side slightly.
And I'm thinking, no, that's gonna catch fire. And I thought that's what was gonna happen. More than he was gonna. I thought his kitchen would have caught fire at some point in the book. I'm amazed it didn't.
Yes. Fuck, one of the saddest things for me is right near the end of the book, he quits smoking right near the end of his diaries, and he then kind of he spends like what has to be like a week in the last couple of weeks of his life scrubbing his walls and just getting pail after pail of like filthy, like, you know, tobacco water just kind of dumped, and thinking like, what a sad way to spend, like, if you have such a limited time, that he spent a bunch of it doing that.
What's the bloody point? Oh,
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, so
there's a lot we didn't, and I think it's about it, but I don't know what it is, because in a way, this book shouldn't be as absorbing as it is, because even though it has been cherry picked to a certain extent, there's still quite a lot of stuff in there which is just went for
Day-to-day
lunch
life.
with G today.
Yeah.
Uh, he seems pleasant, and that's the
Yeah.
end of it or something. So there's no.
Although I do always I like Kenneth's like first response to people is like, fuck this person, fuck them.
Right.
And then 2 days later, they
Yes.
seem pretty nice,
I
actually.
find Bernard delightful in every bit.
You're like, what?
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't even mention there's the whole thing with him basically living with his mother his entire life as well.
Yeah, and the fact that Dad may have been murdered or commit suicide, or
yeah,
just
I think that comes
accidentally
through more in the
drank
film
poison.
than it does in the diaries, right? I think that's something they went with in the film a bit more than.
But I definitely, even just reading the diary,
really?
I was like, hang about. What, he drank poison that was in a cough medicine bottle that was left in the bathroom. Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah.
It's like Vivian leaving the Coke bottle with the
exactly
that turns into an axe wielding mate.
Yeah. But yeah, basically an antidote for not being a.
Yeah, I really hope no one drinks that by mistake. But that's another interesting thing as well. We mentioned Rick Mail as well. There is definitely that weird handing of the baton, which at the same time they're like punk and stuff like that is very much a reaction against the kind of carry on board. But yeah, there is that weird passing of the baton from Kenneth to Rick, right?
I think so. I started to see it when I went back and was watching Kenneth. I was like, oh yeah, definitely. There's a bit of Rick was channeling elements of him for sure.
Although I don't know about I don't know, maybe the Rick Mail diaries may come out one day, but I get the sense Rick Mail was a slightly more kind of well-balanced, happy man, as far as I know, at least.
To some degree. I think he may have had struggles as well, but maybe not to the extent that Kenneth does.
Because it's even literal pain in towards the end of the book, right? When he starts having problems with his bum.
He seemed to have, well, that comes very early in the book, actually. I mean, he seems to have, and I wondered to what degree the piles and stuff would have just added to his like lack of interest in fully consummating.
Yeah, that stuff is kind of the more sad for me in a way, because it just seems so massively unfair to have that added extra layer, and it's the one element that he's almost not. It's not him self-sabotaging. Just
yeah, he kind of has irritable bowels, and then he has full-on spastic colon, and then it goes to an ulcer. It just seems to get worse and worse.
It just seems like, come on, dude. Like, if you were to believe in a creator, like, give this guy a break. He's got all this other stuff going on. Leave this dumb alone, for fuck's sake,
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is he comes up a few times in the documentaries, and it also comes up in the diary. But Kenneth Williams, there's this parts that are almost maddening where he'll be arguing with it's Peter Eade, right? I think who's his agent, right? Arguing him to say, we can't. That's far too much money. Like, tell them to pay me half of that.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Hang on. And then later in the book, when the money is drying up and stuff, he kind of says, like, I had all the fame, and none of the money that insulates you from having all the fame.
Right.
And so one of the things that was, I think, most dispiriting about reading the book was just getting through all the way through his life, but especially near the end, that you still have like gangs of fucking Asbo yobs in the street outside yelling, you're a queer and stuff at his window, and you're like fucking hell. In the 80s, I mean, I guess in the 80s sucked, but like I just thought he can't go anywhere without constantly being, and then at the same time, whenever he goes anywhere, he makes himself the center of all possible attention by doing the story in one of the documentaries about him doing like literally locking the doors in a bar, not letting people leave, and like talking at them for like 6 or 7 hours, and people are like, be at work tomorrow.
You wouldn't necessarily want to be at the pointed end of a Kenneth Williams attack, right?
Yeah.
Although you'd have great memories for the rest of your life about it. You'd tell people about it, right? It is.
Never seemed to own a car. Maybe never learned to drive, I'm guessing.
Seems to be. Although you might have had to in the army, maybe.
Right.
But it's and the other thing about it as well, apart from all that specific to him stuff, I also quite like reading this. This had slightly in common for me with reading the Michael Palin diaries as well. Although Michael Palin goes like further afield, obviously, but because of the way because when Michael Palin was doing his travel series and they had their own books, when you read the Michael Palin diaries, that stuff's almost been edited out, so it'll just be like off to do around the world in 80 days, and then there'll be a big gap in the diary, and then it'll come back.
Right.
So because it's been so interestingly, when you read the Michael Palin, even though he's all over the world, it's quite UK and London centric, and that's what I kind of like. I like things that are like not hermetically sealed exactly, but I like how you see the progression of a time and place, and it's something, I don't know, for me anyways, I like something comforting about reading about him, catching a cab here, going over there, doing this job, doing that, and you just get the
just
sense
getting on the bus. That's fascinating. Just the idea that you're sitting on the bus and Kenneth Williams steps on and sits behind you.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
There's
that sense of, I don't know, the show business world. I'm fascinated to kind of see that play out, and like, oh yeah, I'm on stage this, and then off to Shepperton, and and yeah, there's less carry on stuff that you might expect as well, right? Because but the one thing that is, I didn't realize that he had this habit of basically exposing himself and doing like wanking things and like running around when other people are trying to act. Like that's amazing.
Yes, yeah, some of which is dramatized again in and apparently Sid James was not a big fan, at least according to the moment they show. I didn't see there's that other Sid James, Barbara Windsor, Kenneth Williams like made for TV movie that
yes. There was a few things around that time period, because there's also another good one is The Curse of Steptoe, about Steptoe and Son.
Oh right.
That's a good one. There was a like a rash of them around that period, TV movies about kind of comedy figures of that era. I would recommend the Curse of Steptoe's Son. What's his name from? He's like he's like what's his name? Davis, something Davis. He's like you know him from, he's in loads of Mike Leigh films.
Okay.
But he plays Steptoe, and he's fucking brilliant. He's really, really good. But so we should mention Carry On, because so we did decide to. So originally we were going to watch Carry On Up the Jungle, just because there's someone very fanciable in a skimpy outfit. But then we've discovered not Kenneth, by the way. It's Bernard Bresslaw, of course.
Yes. Oh.
He's the Tarzan, isn't he? I think in that.
I think so. Yeah.
But so we decided not to watch that. And we were going to watch Carry On Emmanuel, which is kind of the last one of the official series before they did that Columbus thing in the 90s, which everyone just kind of hates.
Disowned.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I ever actually saw it.
I don't think I saw it either. No.
Because even like Alexis Sales in that.
Yeah, I think it was an attempt to bridge between that kind of the newer, the kind of the 80s alternative British comedian stuff with the Carry On set. But there wasn't much of the Carry On people left at that point.
No. But then we thought, let's bookend it then. So we went all the way back to the original Carry On Sergeant, because Kenneth Williams is in,
which I had never seen before, I have to say. I think I remember being a kid and again, watching Carry On Laughing on television, right?
Oh yes, yes. This was the clip show.
Yes,
they would have Carry Ons.
And then watching, some of the several of the movies. Obviously, I remember Carry On Dick well. And it's funny too. If you were to ask me, what actor do you think of when I say Julius Caesar? The first actor that comes into my mind has always been Kenneth Williams. Me, that is the cinematic Julius Caesar.
Right. Well, maybe historically accurate. You never know. In terms of
I wonder too now. Do you think that like in Asterix, that whatever that the artist, I can't remember which one's the writer and which one's the artist,
Right.
Goscinny and Uderzo or whatever they are. I wonder if their version of Julius Caesar is based on Kenneth Williams, because I
Very
think,
Walter Softy, isn't he?
and he's got the arched.
Yeah.
Nostrils.
Good call. When did they start writing those?
Well, I think like kind of in the 60s.
Huh.
And
But
I know,
how
and Lee Van Cleef. Lee
I'm
Van
wondering
Cleef's
how much
one of them.
traction Carry On had in France. I don't know. I get the feeling that like I don't know if
Yes.
it would play
Quite
so
the same.
Just kind of quite neatly into the. So we watched the
Yes.
book-ended Carry On, which was actually a fascinating exercise actually to see. But
See Kenneth Connor, who I didn't funny when it wasn't until I was reading the diaries, I was like, who the fuck is Kenneth Connor? Because Williams several times says, like,
he
oh,
loves Kenneth Connor, doesn't he?
Kenneth Connor gives a performance that's truly beyond the film, you know.
Yeah.
And
which is amazing to me, because not to take anything away from Kenneth Connor, but basically he does the or and taking all of them as far as I could tell. Kenneth Connor's magnificent. It's by far the best thing. And really, I mean, he's good, but he does actually be doing the same thing.
For one of them, he actually does also say that Hawtrey's performance is the strongest point of the film.
Yes,
which is interesting.
He kind of reluctantly concedes.
Yeah, it might be.
Just to mention, Kenneth Connor does turn up in Fantabulosa as well, doesn't he? He's the manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in this case, they fuck, I didn't realize that. Holy shit! Now you say that, I completely see that. But wow, yeah, okay, that's interesting.
But you didn't realize it was him in Fantabulosa?
No.
Yeah, no, that's the manager who meets with him in the cafe when he's showing off, and
yeah.
Which is quite nice to have the imprimatur of someone, you know, involved on that production. Yeah.
But Kenneth, anyway, you get to see poor Kenneth in both of these films. You know, well, both Kenneths actually, sadly, are in both of these films.
What's interesting to compare the two as well is one's from 1958, the other from 20 years later. It's quite interesting to see Kenneth Williams still giving it his all, right? Like it's clearly become more of a caricature over time. Like,
oh yes,
he's very different in the 58 film, but he's still firing on guns in the frankly fucking awful Carry On Emmanuel.
Yep.
But the other thing that's interesting about these two to compare as well, actually, wondering what you thought about. Speaking of, you remember you saying Carry On laughing. Do you remember the other show? I think it was just called Best of British or something. Do you remember that? It was like a 30-minute clip show where they just showed clips from great British films like Zulu and stuff.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Anyway, so the thing with Carry On is which was quite interesting. So I have to admit, I've always agreed with one of the reasons I like Ken Russell is that Ken Russell doesn't like the Carry On films.
Okay.
He's in. I think he's in what that's a Carry. He's interviewed in one of those Carry On documentaries, and like saying, "Yeah, I fucking hated those Carry On films." And I was always of the same, because the thing that wound me about the Carry On films, growing up in post Video Nasty's Britain as a horror fan, and you become righteously indignatious about is indignatious a word?
No, use defensive, but that's fine.
About righteously indignant, sorry.
Yeah.
About, you know, what we're not allowed to see, and you know, the draconian censorship and stuff like that. So what always Carry On for me was always like a icon of for fuck's sake, the rest of the world is, you know, they can watch hardcore and, you know, proper adult things, and we're reduced to and it was just a symbol for me of like, for fuck's sake, you know, let's grow up a bit, kind of thing, you know. And the ones that were always on telly, so Carry On started very non-ribald, right? Very non-sex, like Carry On, there's no sex in it.
Yes. I think the most shocking thing for me was when the opening credits came up and it said, starring William Hartnell.
And there we go.
He's the first name. And I was like, what the fuck? William Hartnell's, yeah, the
What
star
people
of the
forget, William
first
Hartnell
Carry On film.
was a star pre-Doctor Who, right? Like he was
Oh
someone
yes,
who would sell a movie, you know.
right. I just
But
didn't expect to see his name attached
right, right.
to a Carry On film.
But so they progress, and then I can't remember exactly which one. It might be maybe not even Carry On Talk, maybe Carry On Nurse, somewhere around there. They start injecting the
Right. Or
oozes.
yeah, the
Yeah,
postcard, like the British
cleavage, and
seaside
yeah,
postcards, sort of. Yeah.
and that's when the films change into that kind of frankly infantile kind of stuff that I find interesting now. Although I
Right.
still don't really get on with kind. I still prefer the more slightly depressing post
Right.
confessions
Adventures,
films. They're
confessions.
like
Yeah.
real time capsules of fuck, the 70s were grim, you know.
Robin Asquith with his like loping fucking polio walk, which we've now discovered.
Right.
Yes. I just thought he had a jaunty swagger to him, but
Oh no, Robin Asquith. Even Robin Asquith is a bit too, you know, is a bit too
right.
Barry Stokes, I think, is my kind of speed. You know, like
Right.
properly the adventures films, which are just Jesus, really people were. Anyway, so those were the ones that were on TV, right? And plus they were in color.
Yes.
They were the
yes.
ones that would be on like prime time. Those were the ones that would be on ITV or whatever. And those are the ones.
Carry On Camping would be on every second week.
Carry On Camping, Carry On Screaming, which of course kids loved because it was the horror one.
The Henry VIII one.
Yeah, Carry On Henry, Carry On Up the Khyber.
Yes, I remember seeing that.
The one that isn't really a Carry On film, Don't Follow That Camel, right? Which is Carry On, Don't Follow That Camel. Carry On
right.
Cowboy, Carry On England, which is a particularly depressing. Carry On at Your Convenience, which is about toilets, so that's hilarious. So all of those would play, and then the early black and white non-sexy ones were like relegated to, they played, but they tended to play, well, number one, they were on BBC. ITV I think had bought all the, because of being commercial station. So I remember at a period in my life, inspired by humor, I decided for a few years to watch every single film that was on television, or at least as many as I could, just as like a blanket, educate yourself about the history of cinema thing. And I was very hardcore. Like I didn't choose. It was just, if it's a film on television I haven't seen before, I'd watch it. And I think Carry On Cabby, I think, came on BBC 2 one afternoon or whatever, and I watched, not particularly looking forward to it, but I was, no, it's a film, it's on television, I have to watch it. Watching Carry On Cabby, and I was like, this is quite good. Like, this is quite a nice, charming little British black and white, you know, have a cup of tea and a biscuit film. Like, not too taxing, but just pleasantly amusing. And that's when I realized, so Carry On used to be this. And to be honest, objectively, they're better. Like the early Carry Ons are better. So people are not familiar with them, I think. And then Carry On Emmanuel, interestingly, the comparison is, because it was, when it was new, it was I think a 15 certificate on video.
Right.
Like all the other Carry Ons would have been PG, right? So Carry On Emmanuel was never on telly. I think later Channel 5 showed it, but in that period when I bet you never saw Carry On Emmanuel.
Oh no, that was our first viewing for me.
Yeah, same here. So it's kind of interesting to compare the two. Not only are they bookends, but they're also kind of like, they represent slightly
the forgotten chapters.
Yeah.
Yes, and I agree. We have a channel here called like a Silver Screen or Silver Gems or some shit, and it's basically public domain. Like it's like stuff that they don't have to pay for. And they would sometimes show like what's the police one? There's one of the very, very early Carry-Ons is basically about
with Steve Guttenberg. That's Carry On Police Academy.
No, that's not what I'm thinking of.
Right.
I don't remember Hawtrey being in that.
Is it Carry On Constable?
That's the one. Yes, yeah. So I watched that. I watched that a couple of years ago and I remember thinking the same as you. I was thinking this is actually better than I remember these films generally being.
They're very genteel, but if you're in the mood, they're exactly what you want in the middle of the afternoon, right?
I very much enjoyed Carry On Sergeant. and it's also it's like an hour and 15 minutes or something. So like it also doesn't outstay its.
Yeah, no,
Of
it's not.
anything, I was almost like this is going so quick that I felt like a few of the relationships could have been expanded on and fleshed out. I mean, it's also Kenneth Williams playing kind of arch and upper class, but not necessarily, to my mind, gay or camp in that one.
No.
Whereas outrageously so in
Oh my God.
in a mad way because he's playing camp French.
Yes,
so you know, and it's
again. The thing is, if you talk about it, it sounds like it should be funny, but it's not. He's a French ambassador, and he's obsessed with bodybuilding. He's like scrawny little bloke in his pajamas, like with weights and stuff. Yeah, and he's doing this. Oh, my chérie, I have to, you know. And yeah, what's her face? Susan. What's her name? Susan Donette is
Emmanuel.
Is Carry On Emmanuel. Is Emmanuel, right? She's got a hell of a career. She was also in the Cannon and Ball film, The Boys in Blue.
Fucking hell.
If you really want to hurt yourself.
Just funny where Jen and I were talking about Cannon and Ball because she painted that picture of the guy with the mullet and the mustache. And I was like, this reminded me quite a bit of Bobby Ball.
Bobby Ball, yeah.
So I had to Google it. Jen obviously had no idea what I was talking about.
She had a proper childhood.
But anyway, so okay, this is a little window onto my life as a child. I remember being like 7 or 8 and actually being obsessed with that mid glut of the Ur sex, because you imagine Ireland, right? Like the best chance you had of seeing a side boob might be Barbara Windsor in, you know, Carry On Camping or something like that, right?
Right.
For some reason, I thought like the absolute model of like, you know, male wit and sexuality was Sid. And I remember my older cousins from because my older cousins from Dublin being fucking bemused, you know, embarrassed, horrified when I started affecting like Sid kind of stuff, you know, like, and I'm a kid from the countryside, so I'm a culture.
You couldn't pull that off now.
No, I'm an Irish culture, and I'm hanging around my city cousins, and I'm like, whoa, blimey!
This will let them know I'm sophisticated.
Exactly. And they're like, what the fuck is wrong with Nick?
Yes, you need to have home video footage.
I wish. But yeah, I spent at least a month or 2 consciously attempting to be Sid James when I was like 7 or 8.
Did you wear like a cloth cap?
I think I did. I think my granddad might have had one I borrowed. Yep.
Yeah, that reminds me of apropos of nothing really. It always amused me that the Dalek takeover of Earth is going to be prevented by men in cloth caps and donkey jackets.
Yes, naturally.
British SF.
You got to go to real men. You know, you're not going to Charles Hawtrey.
No, you want a bin man.
Yes, exactly.
Because Charles Hawtrey wouldn't pick up a bin, would you?
He'd pick up a bin man. I think, no question.
Yeah.
But probably not a bin.
Sorry, one thing actually we did forget to mention a few minutes ago, because I think we're going to have
was Joe Orton, perhaps?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, yeah, we probably should mention his friendship with Joe Orton.
Because that is fascinating as well. Again, because I'd seen the film, you know, Prick Up Your Ears.
Yep.
With Gary Oldman as
who again does look like, what the fuck? How does he do that? Every time I see a photograph of Gary Oldman and then the person he played, I'm like, but
yeah,
either Gary Oldman has the everyman face somehow and just needs to pull a slight jib to look exactly like, but yeah, he looks just like the real Joe Orton.
And what's his face as Halliwell, right? Another great actor.
Oh yes, Molina.
Alfred Molina. Yeah, I'm a big Alfred Molina fan, I have to say.
Yes.
But yeah, and it's been a while since I didn't have time to go back and watch it for this, but I don't remember. He must be a character in it. He must be. But I don't remember Kenneth Williams being a massive presence in the film. But when you read the and obviously you're seeing it through the lens of Kenneth Williams, so I'm sure there was a whole lot going on in Joe Orton's life that had nothing to do with Kenneth Williams. But clearly, I mean, he was a pretty big and important part of his life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it did make me. I mean, not now, but maybe a kick it down the road for a while. But Joe Orton, obviously, rather famously, was the other great diarist, right? And so apparently, his diary in some sections runs right alongside Kenneth's diary. It'd be very interesting to see how that works.
They're probably actually more interesting. I have a feeling, again, without having gone too deep, but I think the Joe Orton oeuvre is a little bit seems a little bit dated now. I think like stuff that seemed quite cutting edge at the time, maybe hasn't necessarily dated that well. So, but I'd be up for the
diary. Might be interesting. I doubt. I'm not interested in reading the plays or the rest of it, but just the raw Joe.
That might be the scabrous takedowns that you might have expected from
that. I think,
from this.
But I will say, you know, I was left with a great sense of sadness about finishing this book. I have to say, I think, you know, you be warned. It's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely somebody who let it all out on the page.
But also seeing it laid out as well, I would say, I was talking about that incremental kind of, you know, look at this show business world across decades. I can see how when you're in the middle of it, you don't have the long view, right? But when you see it like this, you do get a sense of like a career and a body of work, which I don't think he necessarily had the chance to appreciate. And when you see it like this, you do realize, wow, that is kind of, the whole thing about him like hating anyone else ad-libbing, but as soon as he got bored or something, he just couldn't. So he's kind of that, certainly not a team player, but one of the few people who might be, I don't know, again, that kind of weird talent that I think above all, you don't know how to harness it, because you can't indulge him because it'll totally show whatever he's doing. But at the same time, you're like, what a shame to not.
It's the Timothy Carey, you know, like the bottled lightning, where if you use it right, it can completely elevate whatever.
And very few people, and I suppose you could argue that when he kind of took it into his own hands, the talk show appearance stuff towards the end of his life, that's probably as close, because it's almost like an evening with kind of, you know, like a stage show or something. You were saying about John Waters earlier, like he did those. So that seems to fit him like, but then of course, after 5 minutes, he's like, oh, you know, it's like, it's too familiar. Like I feel as if they're telling this. So it's dude just can't get a break, right? And then he has to run to the fucking toilet with his spastic collar. It's like,
this is the one last thing that I jumped out at me again off the page was he talks up Les Dawson a few times in this, and I thought to myself, fuck yeah, I really do. He needs a reappraisal, does Les Dawson? I think you and I need to maybe somehow.
Well, yes, on the one hand you have that, and you have Marky Smith's record, but then on the other hand, I remember him dressed as a woman playing the piano on Blankety Blank, and I'm like, maybe not.
All right. Anyway, I would recommend this. I think this is an incredible achievement, and kudos to Russell Davies, who apparently was hated by Kenneth, but got to edit his diaries anyway.
Yeah,